A cold wind snakes through the soaring marble corridors of St. Peter's, carrying the heavy scent of incense and wet stone, yet failing to mask a sharper metallic tang that lingers in the air. You feel it, an almost physical pressure against your chest, the unspoken knowledge that ambition walks these halls alongside holiness, that desire and duty are not always easily separated. Every echo of footsteps seems a secret whispered across centuries, a reminder that power, once claimed, leaves stains no prayer can fully cleanse. Before we descend further into this shadowed world, pause for a moment with me. If the hidden truths of history thrill you, give a nod in the form of a like and subscribe. Wherever you are, whether listening from the quiet streets of Florence, the crowded cafes of Tokyo, or the calm of your own study, know that we are united in curiosity, exploring corridors of time that few have dared to tread. Comment below where you are watching from. It astonishes me how history can connect hearts across oceans and eras, binding us through shared wonder at the past. Rodrigo Borgia was born under the sun-soaked sky of the Valencian countryside on January 1, 1431. A boy of quiet manners and sharp eyes, he learned early that power was never granted. It was seized. Dust clung to his bare feet as he ran along the narrow streets of Chiva, but destiny would sweep him from those humble roads to the marble expanses of Rome, where altars rose like promises and corruption flowed as freely as the Tiber itself. Even as a youth, Rodrigo displayed an instinct for advantage, watching alliances form and crumble, noting the subtle hierarchies that shaped both church and city. By the time he arrived in Rome, the city was a paradox incarnate. Pilgrims knelt at gilded altars in prayer, their whispered supplications mixing with the raucous clamors of merchants and street performers. Night revealed a different Rome, one of taverns and clandestine rendezvous, where favors and silver changed hands under lantern light. The young Spaniard navigated these contrasts with an uncanny ease. In one breath he could offer a courteous bow to a cardinal, in the next, he could negotiate a marriage alliance or secure the transfer of ecclesiastical benefices that would swell his coffers and influence. His uncle, Alfonso de Borgia, soon Pope Calixtus III, was his first gateway. Rodrigo's ascent was neither miraculous nor divinely ordained. It was calculated, deliberate, fueled by a family's ambition and the intoxicating lure of power. At 25, he became a cardinal deacon, and with each new title and each handshake and secretive nod, he drew Rome ever closer under his personal orbit. His eyes gleamed not merely with faith, but with something more calculating, a hunger for status that would leave a mark on the city unlike any seen before. Rodrigo's Rome was a city of contradictions. By daylight, processions of devout men and women traced paths of prayer along sunlit streets. By night, those same streets echoed with the clatter of coin, the murmurs of seduction, and the low hum of political maneuvering. It was a stage upon which Rodrigo performed, a theater where each action, each smile, each whispered promise was carefully calibrated to advance his vision. He accumulated wealth with the patience of a spider spinning its web, pulling in benefices, titles, and lands from across Europe. Lavish feasts, gilded apartments, and a growing constellation of mistresses were not mere indulgences. They were tools, symbols of power and influence, carefully displayed for those astute enough to read the signals. Among his consorts, Vanozza Catane became the most consequential. She bore him children whose fates would intertwine with the city's destiny: Juan, Cesare, Lucrezia, and Joffre. Each child was a piece on a chessboard that Rodrigo would command with precision, using familial bonds as instruments of strategy and influence. Yet, even amidst such domestic calculations, Rodrigo never shed the audacious behaviors that scandalized Rome. Pope Pius II once wrote a scathing letter condemning his conduct in Siena, describing scenes of excess and impropriety that left even seasoned courtiers aghast. Rodrigo read it, perhaps, with a private smirk. Shame was a luxury he could not afford. The conclave of 1492 sealed his fate as Pope Alexander VI. In the Sistine Chapel, beneath Michelangelo's future frescoed ceiling, 23 cardinals gathered to select the next pontiff. Gold exchanged hands with fluid secrecy, promises were whispered in Latin, and benefices were distributed like wafers in communion. When the white smoke rose, it carried with it both triumph and foreboding. The city erupted in celebration, yet beneath the torches and cheers lurked an undercurrent that only those attuned to subtle shifts in Rome's rhythm could perceive. A papacy that would challenge every preconception of sanctity, power, and moral restraint. From the moment of his coronation, Alexander VI moved through his pontificate as both priest and prince. By day, he dispensed justice, addressed grievances, and enacted public reforms to maintain order. By night, his ambitions for wealth, legacy, and influence revealed themselves in ways that blurred the lines between sacred duty and worldly indulgence. Was this duality a reflection of personal vice, or an inevitable product of a city and era where the divine and the profane intertwined like vines around marble pillars? Only Rome, in all its sunlit and shadowed glory, seemed capable of containing such a man, and only time would tell if the city could endure the consequences of his desires. The marble corridors of St. Peter's, gleaming under flickering candlelight, whispered secrets that would outlast the man who walked them. Shadows lingered longer here than anywhere else, stretching across walls and floors as if to remind all who entered. Power, unchecked leaves marks deeper than the stone itself. And in those shadows, the rise of Alexander VI had only just begun, a story poised to unravel with scandal, ambition, and a darkness that would haunt the Vatican for centuries. Candlelight shivers across frescoed ceilings, turning painted angels and mythic gods into restless observers, their gazes seeming to track your every movement. You crouch behind a marble column, heart thundering, caught in the intoxicating perfume of roasting chestnuts mingled with the heady warmth of wine and human desire. Laughter drifts, soft and teasing, yet beneath it thrums the pulse of power, an unspoken warning that what you are about to witness belongs to shadows, not sunlight. The story you are about to follow is one few dared to commit to parchment, yet preserved in meticulous Latin records, hidden for centuries within the Vatican's secretive archives. If the unraveling of forbidden histories stirs your curiosity, take a moment now to like and subscribe. Wherever you are, perched in a European cafe, at home in the quiet of your study, or listening under the hum of city lights, know that across oceans and time, we share this moment. Tell me where you are watching from. It astonishes me how these stories, born in the corridors of power, connect us all in awe and wonder. October 31st, 1501, was a night thick with both superstition and ambition. All Hallows' Eve cast a pall over the Vatican, a time when the living were said to brush against spirits. Alexander VI's apartments were alive with a different kind of specter. 50 courtesans, finely attired in silks that shimmered under torchlight, moved with deliberate grace through chambers scented by chestnuts roasting in ornate braziers. Cesare and Lucrezia Borgia, scions of ambition and scandal, attended closely, their presence a reminder that the family's power was inseparable from its capacity for spectacle. The evening began innocuously. Guests reclined on gilded divans, plates of roasted meats and delicate pastries before them, wine from carefully selected vineyards sliding down throats as conversation drifted from political alliances to the latest artistic commissions. Music, harpsichords, lutes, and viols created a low, undulating rhythm that seemed to sync with the flickering shadows on the walls. Yet, even in these early moments, an electric tension hummed, as though the entire room knew it teetered on the edge between decorum and debauchery. At the stroke of midnight, the banquet transformed. Candles were removed from tables, placed on the floor to form pools of warm, trembling light. Chestnuts were scattered like small, polished stones across the marble, a playful yet subversive motif for what was to come. The courtesans began to move, at first elegantly, then with increasing abandon, collecting the chestnuts while garments fell away, revealing the human form in deliberate display. The audience, including cardinals, nobles, and foreign envoys, watched with a mixture of fascination, discomfort, and a grim acknowledgment that participation, or at least witness, ensured complicity. "Observe," one whispered in Italian, barely audible over the delicate strumming of a lute, "and remember, the Pope's eye sees all." Alexander VI reclined on a throne-like seat, flanked by his children, eyes glinting with the satisfaction of a man whose authority extended beyond spiritual and temporal bounds. Cesare, tall and striking, observed with a calculating patience, while Lucrezia's expression remained enigmatic, part participant, part observer, part instrument of family strategy. It was a scene choreographed as much for politics as pleasure, a living tableau where power and desire were inseparable. The clinking of goblets punctuated competitions among the male guests, who sought favor or status through acts of audacious indulgence. Luxury goods, silk tunics, jeweled slippers, ornate hats, were offered as prizes, tangible markers of performance in a game that was equal parts ritual, spectacle, and moral transgression. Each act unfolded under the gaze of the Pope, each movement recorded in the meticulous chronicles of Johann Burchard, whose quill never flinched in the face of excess. Through his words, history remembers the night not only for its eroticism, but for its embodiment of ambition unchecked by conscience. The sound of wine-laden laughter, soft moans, and whispered instructions wove together like a symphony of corruption, echoing through corridors designed to contain both the ceremonial and the clandestine. The frescoes above, depicting saints and deities alike, seemed almost complicit in the spectacle, their painted eyes reflecting the tension between sacred ideals and human indulgence. And as the night deepened, the boundaries between family loyalty, papal authority, and personal gratification dissolved entirely, leaving a room alive with shadowed consequence. By dawn, the echoes of that night had already begun to scatter. Servants carried away the last chestnuts, the floor scrubbed of its illicit testimony. Rome awoke unaware, yet forever marked. Pilgrims arrived at St. Peter's, cardinals conducted their morning duties, and Alexander VI presented himself to the public as though nothing had transpired. But knowledge of the evening lingered, carried in whispers through streets, through letters sent abroad, and through the diaries of those few who dared chronicle what had occurred. It was a night that challenged the very notion of papal sanctity, a spectacle that forced every observer to question the interplay of power, morality, and human desire. And yet, as shadows receded from the Vatican apartments, one truth remained unshakable. In the corridors of ambition, the boundaries of the sacred could bend, and sometimes shatter entirely. The banquet of chestnuts was not merely entertainment. It was a statement, a warning, and a testament to a family whose appetite for influence had no apparent limit, and whose legacy of scandal would haunt Rome for generations to come. Dust motes drift through the shafts of morning sunlight, glinting like tiny stars in a chamber where candles once flickered with extravagant fervor. The scent of aged wood and cold stone carries the weight of centuries, an invisible residue of human ambition and moral compromise. You feel it, a pressure that presses against memory itself, whispering of power wielded without restraint and the echoes of desires that refused to die quietly. The story you are about to conclude traces the ripples left by a pontiff whose indulgence and cunning reshaped Rome and the Catholic Church alike. If the unfolding of history's darker corners fascinates you, take a moment to like and subscribe. Wherever this narrative reaches you, be it the quiet of your study, the bustle of a city street, or the stillness of a night watch, know that we share a global curiosity, a human desire to confront the shadows left by those who shaped the world. Comment below where you are watching from. It amazes me that centuries-old events can unite viewers across continents in shared wonder and reflection. By the autumn of 1503, The once vibrant corridors of Alexander II's apartments had begun to fall silent. The opulent halls, once echoing with the laughter of courtesans and the clink of goblets, now smelled faintly of wax and decay. Alexander himself was gone, felled by illness that some whispered was divine justice, others a carefully administered poison. Cesare, stripped of papal protection, wandered the battlefield as a mercenary, a prince without a kingdom, while Lucrezia, having endured scandal and manipulation, assumed the title of Duchess of Ferrara, her life forever entwined with her family's notorious legacy. The weight of consequence settled over Rome like a fog, invisible yet inescapable. Church and state reeled from the Borgia imprint. Cardinals who had once danced in shadowed chambers now navigated the delicate balance between loyalty and fear. Reformers, inspired by the excesses of the papacy, pressed with renewed vigor for moral rectitude. Councils convened, laws were drafted, and ordinances proposed. But how does one cleanse a system so deeply stained by spectacle and corruption? Alexander's reign had proven that spiritual authority could be wielded as both shield and sword, a duality that challenged centuries of ecclesiastical doctrine. "The world has seen enough of indulgence unchecked," murmured a Venetian diplomat in a letter to Florence, "and yet I fear the seeds of ambition remain in every shadowed corner of the Vatican." The aftermath extended beyond clerical walls. Artists commissioned by the papacy sought to reconcile grandeur with virtue, attempting to create a Rome that reflected divine order rather than human appetite. Frescoes and sculptures became visual instruments of moral instruction, reminders of both the beauty achievable under patronage and the peril of placing power above conscience. Rome itself seemed to change subtly, the streets quieter, the marketplaces less brazen, as though the city's heartbeat had been tempered by the lessons of scandal. Even ordinary citizens carried the story in whispers, recounting tales of the banquet of chestnuts with a mix of horror and fascination. Merchants and servants alike understood that the papacy's excess was not just spectacle. It was a reflection of the precarious balance between sacred responsibility and human frailty. The echoes of laughter, the glint of silks, the scattered chestnuts, all persisted in collective memory, tangible reminders of how easily the sacred could be subordinated to desire. Yet history is seldom a straight line. As the Church began to codify discipline, the Borgia shadow lingered, a testament to ambition's enduring power. Cesare's military campaigns, although ultimately doomed, had demonstrated the effectiveness of strategy divorced from morality, leaving rulers across Europe to wonder how much could be accomplished when conscience was optional. Lucrezia's life, constrained by alliances and circumstance, became a mirror reflecting both resilience and the cost of familial ambition. And Alexander's papacy remained a case study in the dangers inherent when charisma, cunning, and unrestrained desire converge at the pinnacle of spiritual authority. The Vatican itself became both shrine and cautionary tale. Successive popes moved carefully through its halls, aware of the shadows Alexander had cast. Rooms once used for clandestine indulgence were redecorated, frescoes replaced, apartments reassigned, yet the psychological imprint remained. Visitors might marvel at the art, the architecture, the grandeur, but beneath the polished veneer, the memory of what had transpired lingered like a faint chill, an invisible testament to excess and human frailty. In the end, the legacy of Alexander VI is neither fully condemnatory nor forgiving. It is a mirror reflecting the eternal tension between sacred aspiration and human desire. Power, once surrendered to indulgence, leaves marks that are imperceptible yet profound, shaping institutions, families, and cities for generations. The chestnuts scattered across marble floors, the whispered laughter in candlelit chambers, the careful records of a chronicler, all persist as fragments of a story that refuses to fade, a story of ambition, corruption, and the inexorable consequences of placing the self above the divine. And as sunlight finally touches the dust-laden floors where once the Borgia triumphed, one question remains. When the echo of vice fades into history, how will humanity confront the shadows it leaves behind?